The floor is yours.
Oh, thanks, Shweta, and thanks for the introduction, but thanks for your work, most importantly. And it's really good to see so many old friends, so many old colleagues, and an old running partner. Avi and I used to race together until we lost him to the West Coast. So it's good to see you back on the East Coast, Avi. Look, there's no question we're at a pivotal moment right now. COP26 finished up a couple of weeks ago. I know people have discussed that earlier in this proceeding. And while it produced some areas of hope, it also left a lot on the table. And I think that's what this conversation really is all about. At the same time, here at home, I think it was referenced on the last panel, the Build Back Better Act, which is the most ambitious climate package in U.S. history, is working its way through Congress. The House has passed it, but its fate and the investments that are embedded in that, of course, now lie in the hands of the Senate. And as I like to say, we still need to climb one large Appalachian mountain. In short, I think we're at a profound moment of decision. We either seize the best opportunity we've ever had to take true action, or we don't. And we suffer devastating consequences if we choose the latter path. We don't have time. There is no next time. This is it. So let me start by saying a few words about the COP. This was the most important, I think, and high-stakes global climate conference to date, maybe even more so than Paris, to see whether the mechanism of ratcheting up ambition could actually work. It was high, as I said, it's high stake. Countries around the world were aware of that, and given that 1 degree of warming has already destroyed forests, flooded cities, and battered coastlines, people knew what the stakes were. And people around the world who had been pounded by this extreme weather, by the devastating effects of drought, of loss of food and water supplies, were aware also. That's why nearly 100,000 activists showed up on the streets of Glasgow during the final days of the conference, demanding that countries be held accountable, not just for future generations, but right now. They knew we don't have time. There is no next time. The central mission of COP26 was clear. It was to raise the level of commitment from countries all over the world to secure emissions targets for 2030, targets that could hold global warming to just 1.5 degree of raise based on a Celsius scale. That didn't happen, and that's, I think, quite frankly, disappointing. But there were some vital steps, I think, that took place at the conference, and a major reason for that was that activists and non-governmental actors finally at least had a friend in the White House. Here was a president who on day one rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement. He then committed to cutting emissions in the United States by 50 to 52% below peak levels by 2030, and who then pledged to double climate assistance to developing nations in 2024 when he spoke to the UN General Assembly. I think these efforts allowed a true climate champion, Senator John Kerry, to come to the negotiating table in Glasgow from a real position of credibility and of strength, and that paid off because other representatives around the world knew they had to match a certain level of urgency. And we saw a host of representatives from the US to the EU, which had moved earlier, to the United Kingdom, Japan, Canada, Korea, all submitted new targets for 2030. These new targets generated a wave of momentum that was difficult for other countries to resist. That was clear when it came to some of the most widespread pledges, and I associate with what the panel said. Pledges are great, but pledges that are out in the middle of the century don't count for nearly as much as what you're going to do right now. But there were pledges. Over 100 countries pledged to cut methane emissions by 30% by 2030. Even more pledged to end deforestation in the same time frame. And while the Glasgow Climate Pact, the final text that came out of the conference, called for a phase down of coal rather than a phase out, which was in the original text, I think it still sent a message that coal is on its way out. And it was backed up by a commitment to revisit emissions targets next year rather than in 2025. That shows the level of urgency to curb the most catastrophic and immediate impacts of climate change and to support vulnerable communities across the world that have borne the brunt of climate change so far. Those communities know we don't have time. There is no next time. For them, saying it's an existential threat is real, and it's today. But let me be clear, as I said at the beginning, while there's certainly are areas of hope coming out of COP26, there are plenty of areas where the conference fell short, the most notable being that it didn't meet the goal of keeping warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Climate Action Tracker, which analyzed the pledges made by countries in the wake of the conference, Joe alluded to this, found that the new 2030 targets put forward in Glasgow could lower projected global temperature increase by only 0.3 degrees, from 2.7 degrees to 2.4 Celsius. And while that's progress, we're way past the point where we can be satisfied with small moves in the right direction. We don't have time. We need fundamental and transformative change. And part of overcoming that challenge comes down to developed nations. Those nations have fallen short of their 2015 pledge to contribute $100 billion annually in financial assistance to developing countries by 2020. That's a goal they're now projected to reach not until 2023. But the inability of wealthy countries to follow through with a commitment like that violates the trust and goodwill of others. It not only makes it look like we're only in it for ourselves, but it puts at risk the lives and livelihoods of literally hundreds of millions of people. And so in the meantime, the U.S., I think, must make it absolutely clear that we are fully committed to climate action across the board, from those in civil society, from the private sector, as we heard on the last panel, to Congress, which we need to do some work on. And of course, the most important way of doing that right now is to pass the Build Back Better Act. It's the $1.7 trillion package that's before that passed the House, that's before the Senate, has $550 billion worth of climate investment included in it. It's a staggering amount of money and incentives in renewable energy, electric vehicles, pollution cleanup, environmental justice, and more. It does it at scale by tying justice, jobs, and climate together so that people experience tangible benefits in their communities and in their daily lives. Those investments will put millions of Americans to work in good-paying union jobs. They'll cut household energy costs by $500 a year, and they'll start to turn the tide on the ravages of pollution that so many Americans suffer from. The Build Back Better Act also gives President Biden, in my view, the tools the administration needs, together with ambitious executive action. I'm glad you were up at the EPA. And strong state and non-governmental leadership to live up to the president's pledge to cut U.S. greenhouse gas emissions in half based on peak levels by 2030. We can show the rest of the world that we mean business and that it's possible for them to do it too. They can take advantage of our investments, benefit from the lower costs of key technologies, and use new models as blueprints for building their own economies at lower consumer costs, create good jobs, reduce pollution, and tackle climate change. So as I said, we find ourselves at a profound moment of decision right now. What we do over the next really few weeks, and definitely the next few years, both in the US and on the global stage, is going to permanently shape the world we live in. We need more than COP26. We need more than Build Back Better. In fact, we need a continuous drive, that continuous ratchet of ambition that was envisioned in the structure of the Paris Agreement. So we got to come back in Sharm el Sheikh and COP28 and COP29 and keep increasing ambition. And that's why I think the work of the people in this room is so important. I'm thrilled that the conference is bringing together so many voices, so many important ideas. Thanks for your focus and your commitment. It's clear we need your hard work. We need your energy more than ever. And I want to close with one thought that I want to borrow from the 2018 IPCC 1.5 report, which said that to meet the climate test, to get to zero by mid-century, and I'm quoting, we need to transform the global economy on the size and scale that's never occurred in human history. So I'm going to say that one more time. We need to transform the global economy on the size and scale that's never occurred in human history. That is an awesome challenge. So I think we should take heart from the fact that we can rise to that challenge, meet it, and transform the global economy in a way that's profound, historic, will produce equity and justice for people across the globe. Thank you very much.